Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my prediction for the Naoya Inoue versus Murodjon Akhmadaliev fight. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like the video if you do indeed like the video, and feel free to join the Patreon as well. It's, doing really well at the moment. There's been plenty of videos that have come as requests from there, and again I really appreciate all the support I've had. You can request any kind of combat sporting related video and I will try my best to get it out there for you guys, and like I said, the link will be in the description. Thank you very much. Let's get into this fight though. So on a stacked weekend of boxing, this is a fight which is just going criminally under the radar in my opinion. I think it's had a very poor amount of promotion and it's just really not been pushed. I mean, as a British fan myself, I don't even know how I'm going to be able to watch the fight without trying to, get some sort of bad, like, illegal link or something like that. Do you know what I mean? It's not an easy fight to access at the moment because, Top Rank has not got their deal with Sky anymore. And again, Top Rank just aren't really promoting or pushing their events that well anymore because of their deal ending with ESPN. They don't really know where they're going. So again, that's a bit of a mess as well. But then also the Matchroom thing as well. Matchroom have, of course, the Paddy Donovan event this weekend, but they could at least, give that a little bit of time to Akhmadaliev. They were keen to push and promote to him to get the fight, but they haven't really pushed and promoted the fights as a whole. And it's a big undisputed fight against the one pound for pound best fighters in the world. I just, like I say, think it is criminally underpromoted. I know it is on such a great weekend of boxing where, of course, Canelo Crawford is going on, but I would also just like to say that there should have been more of a push for this fight, and like I say, I would have just liked to have seen that. But this fight has been there ready to be made for a long time with, of course, purse bids. I don't know if they were particularly avoided, but Inoue's gone to go and choose other contenders instead and other challengers instead. I mean, he was more keen to go down the route of fighting a Sam Goodman or a Raymond Cardenas or a TJ Doheny than that of a Akhmadaliev. And that is interesting because Sam Goodman was getting ordered to fight him, and that was the same time that the IBF were ordering Akhmadaliev to fight Inoue. So again, it's interesting to see, in more recent times, we've seen the IBF be the kind of big pushing factor for, getting fighters stripped of belts and things like that. Of course, happened to Canelo, happened to Usyk as well. But for Inoue, that just never really happened in Akhmadaliev. So Akhmadaliev and his team seem to gather a bit of frustration. And of course, like I say, that's perhaps built a little bit of a narrative for this fight, which again really hasn't been touched upon that much. If it was a British fight, I feel like it really would have been pushed, or even an American fight would have been talked about much more. But again, like I say, that's not really been talked about that much. But Akhmadaliev might be coming into this fight with a few frustrations to let out. I mean, would he have gotten this fight sooner if he hadn't had lost to Tapales? We probably would have to say, because he, of course, had the loss to Tapales. He was a champion before that, a unified champion before that, and then he lost to Tapales, and that was quite a controversial loss. It was a very close fight, split decision, a bit of a surprise to see Tapales beat somebody with such a big pedigree, amateur pedigree as well in Akhmadaliev, but of course, Inoue then went to go and knock out Tapales, so I guess if we're going off mutual opponents there, that's not necessarily a good sign for Akhmadaliev, but again, that was a bit of an older Tapales, and again, that was a close decision for Akhmadaliev, and maybe an off night for Akhmadaliev, and, well, of course, this fight is going to show the levels in which Tapales and Akhmadaliev actually are as opponents for Inoue, but of course, we will have to wait and see. Is it a fight of truly the two best fighters in the division for the moment? Yes, but, Nakatani is moving up, and, it's one of them cases in which they've kind of already got an announcement for Inoue's next fight. He's having His Excellency getting involved, and, like I say, what a shock that means that they've already announced his next fight. Again, that's what they did with Bam Rodriguez. It's not a thing that the fans appreciate, really. It's not a thing that is good for the fighters. I don't even think the fighters appreciate their next fights being announced already, but Nakatani seems to be making his move up into the super bantamweight division. In his next fight, he's going to vacate his titles most likely, which is going to create an interesting picture in the bantamweight division, which I'll touch upon in a moment. But again, it's going to mean that His Excellency is now properly getting involved with Inoue, which is, I suppose, a good thing to an extent. I mean, I don't think he had much of an involvement in the making of this fight, which is, again, quite surprising, but they're doing a Mexico versus Japan card at, like I say, December time, so again, that's why I think that they're trying to make David Picasso versus Inoue. Then again, like I say, they kind of already have announced that, which is, when they did the announcement for Bam Rodriguez versus Martinez before the Cafu fight, at least then, Cafu hasn't been, he was a world champion in his own right, but he hasn't got the same level of pedigree and he hasn't got the same kind of 50-50 type of hype level. Whereas this fight is a really, really good matchup, and the fans, certain fans are split on to which way the fight could go. They could see an upset happening, which would be a minor upset, really, of Akhmadaliev going and beating Inoue. And so the fact that they're already trying to announce David Picasso as an opponent for him, again, it's just confusing to me. And like I say, the promotion for this fight has been very poor for the magnitude of this. I think Top Rank really shouldn't be representing the guys in Japan because, they don't push Japanese boxing overseas enough. I know that Tekken Promotions, are able to sell out big arenas and stuff in Japan, but there really should be more of a push for Inoue and other, fighters like a Nakatani and, these other guys in smaller weight divisions. If they were, again, if I feel like they were with, maybe a Matchroom, maybe a PBC, or, maybe just with His Excellency alone, they would get more of a push. And again, there's opportunities there for promoters to do that because, again, like I said, I just feel like Top Rank really haven't really taken the grasp of the fans out in Japan and, like I say, really tried to push these smaller weight divisions enough. But, like I say, then at the same time, Matchroom haven't really talked about this fight much, like I said. I'm not sure if Inoue has really been ducking this fight or not. I mean, he's taken a couple of interesting challenges which weren't his initial plan when he moved up. I mean, his initial plan when he moved up was to, have a couple fights in the division, beat off some of the big names, like at the time, Tapales, Neri, I think Casemiro was a name at the time, and then he was going to straight away kind of jump up into the featherweight division. But instead, he's kind of stuck around in the division maybe a little bit longer than he first anticipated and fans expected. But he has still taken on some elite names. I mean, Neri's a very good name to have on his resume. Of course, Tapales straight away was a great name to get. And then, a few other names as well that he was, Cardenas on paper, with hindsight, isn't a bad fight to take. Doheny is a decent name to have as well on the resume. Nothing too crazy, but again, like I say, certain fights maybe weren't necessarily needed. Like I say, the Doheny fight I just feel like wasn't really needed. But then, he's still always taken elite names in his career. Of course, in the bantamweight division, he was doing that for a long amount of time as well. Of course, you can't forget the Fulton fight as another elite name in which he took, which of course has, aged very well, that win. And I mean, has he ducked Akhmadaliev? The whole thing with the purse bids, again, does make for an interesting look. He did say that this will be his toughest opponent yet, showing that the respect is there between, Inoue and Akhmadaliev, and he is, like I say, respecting him coming into this fight. But again, the arguments of him ducking, I don't know, maybe. I think something that, is very interesting to see, the fact that why he stayed around the super bantamweight division so long is, of course, Inoue's kind of indestructibility, if that's even a word, has been tested in more recent fights, of course, with him being dropped against Neri and, more kind of surprisingly, against Cardenas, who both are southpaws and both landed a similar shot on the inside, catching him early on. Maybe this is the reason as to why he isn't rushing into the featherweight division. Maybe this is why he wanted to take a few of the other, top contenders on and give them a bit of a chance, because if he does move up into the featherweight division, then the punches are going to be a lot harder. I mean, you look at a Nick Ball, he's a destructive puncher who's going to be putting it on you. You look at and Espinoza as well. He carries a good level of power. You know, there's plenty of guys in that featherweight division which do carry their own level of power. I mean, Leao, you saw the knockout he managed to get over Lopez. I'm not saying he's a typically massive puncher, but still, you know, the power is there with these guys. So maybe from then more recent contests, Inoue has been put off possibly moving up into the featherweight division, which has kind of resulted in, you know, maybe that's why this fight has happened, because he knows he can't keep going around challenging other guys, and if he doesn't want to move up into the featherweight division, then realistically he has to take this fight at some point. And again, you know, he's taking this fight now, and then he's probably gonna, you know, fight Nakatani after David Picasso. Then, you know, that's another 3 more fights until he even considers, you know, moving up into the featherweight division. And he might have lost by then. You know, the whole dynamic might have been kind of gone by then. The hype might be gone by then if he loses. So again, we might never see an Inoue in the featherweight division. For Akhmadaliev, I mean, his last 3 wins have been, you know, looked as good because they've all been stoppages, but he hasn't really been tested at that top level in his more recent fights, coming off the loss to Tapales. But at the end of the day, them wins are confidence boosting fights. They're fights in which, of course, he didn't really want to take because, again, like I say, he's been trying to campaign and push for this fight. And at the same time, you know, I would have maybe liked to have seen him try and go in against an ex-Inoue opponent just to see if he could have, you know, gotten a better of maybe, like I say, a Cardenas or a Doheny, or, you know, somebody like that. That could have been maybe a good fight to go in against. But, you know, like I say, he's instead been having a few decent fights, getting a few decent knockouts. I think his probably toughest fights to date, you know, name-wise, was, of course, when he was champion. I mean, he fought Ronnie Rios when Rios was in a decent stage of his career and got a good win there. He fought Daniel Roman and got quite a close fight there. So, again, you know, he's had a couple high-up tests, but nothing realistically at the level as what Inoue has had to face in his career. To speak about both fighters individually, of course, when you're speaking about 2 fighters that are at the elite of their game, and, you know, 2 great fighters, it's difficult to be able to list off everything that they're good at. But again, I'll list off a few things. So, of course, the speed of hand, the accuracy of Inoue is just 2 things which are incredible. The changing of gears, you know, that's been showcased on multiple fights now. And I mean, I know it was against a lesser opponent in Kim, but the way that he was able to change gear as soon as Kim kind of invited him forwards and just get him out of there just like that was brutal, to be honest. He makes the adjustments. Of course, that's been shown on multiple occasions now, with him staying very composed, but then making the adjustments not to make the same mistake again in the fights against Cardenas and Neri after being knocked down, and even in the Doheny fight as well, because he did get caught with a couple of shots in that, not really enough to be able to damage him, but still a couple of shots. He's got good in and out footwork, and, you know, the management of distance is excellent typically. He makes you question with great feints. He changes levels really well. He works gaps and angles well. He knows how to regroup and stay composed. When he did get knocked down, especially that second time as well, you know, he was very composed, you know, looking at the ref, taking it all in. He seemed very much, you know, just not rocked or hurt, like I say, very just clear-eyed, and knew exactly where he was, what he had to do to just, like I say, made the most of the count, got back to his feet, and then just got straight back to work again. And like I say, it was a very composed thing in which plenty of fighters haven't had to experience, like Akhmadaliev. He's got good head movements, very good head movements. He punches through the guard, which is something in which you see him do on, you know, many of occasions. He can really push and punch his, you know, shots through by fully extending his shots while still carrying a deadly level of power. His shot variety is excellent as well, finding the gaps and finding the angles. His speed of counters and timing is great. He is able to find his range very quickly. He makes you pay. He can fight at a mid or an in close distance. I think he, of course, fights his best work at a mid range with a very good asserting jab. When he keeps you on the ropes, you know, he's going to be low landing shots and throwing shots, and, you know, he can get you on the ropes just by making you hesitate a lot. And I think he is going to be able to have bits of success on the ropes against Akhmadaliev, especially if he can do that early on and, like I say, assert that dominance without being reckless. He is very observant whilst he's throwing. You know, he's not smothering. The way that he's able to get certain fighters out is really impressive. You know, when he is putting his combinations together and his shots together, it's not wasteful punches when it's trying to recklessly get you out of there. It's, you know, oh, I can see that you carrying up a little bit here. Let me go around, take 1, 2, 3, 4 shots with the right hand, just in a row, because he sees that that gap is just there waiting and it's not getting covered. So again, like I say, it's just a really great level of discipline and observation in which he throws at his shots with. I suppose negatives to an extent. I mean, of course, he's been shown that he gets caught early on and he has them lapses in focus, perhaps being overconfident. I still think he does fight at times with his chin in the air, which I do believe is an issue. And he is perhaps starting to plant his feet a little bit more instead of fighting an in and out type style. And often when he gets backed up, now he's trying to fight his way off the side of the ropes. And again, I don't know if that's something that I would recommend. I think Akhmadaliev maybe moves a little bit better, defensively circling around. He's not really had a tremendous amount of acid tests going the full distance. I mean, the last time that he really did was a tough fight against Daenerys. So again, if he does go the full distance, is he going to be able to be as sharp, as skilled, as controlled as somebody who in Akhmadaliev, who in more recent times has been consistently going the distance? If he can't control and have his fight his own way, again, he can, have his own problems. He can get caught dropping his guard. He can square up and stand tall if forcing or rushing the fight. Of course, that's when he got dropped twice. He can perhaps have a little bit of a lack of discipline, maybe creeping in a little bit. He can be moved by shots. Again, another reason as to why he might not be too keen to move up into the featherweight division just yet. He, like I say, is trying to fight off the ropes a little bit more, and he can launch in with his attacks, and that's where Akhmadaliev's fast hands and counters might be able to have a good level of success. To carry on speaking more about Akhmadaliev, he's, like I say, got them fast hands. He's got a compact set of explosive combinations in which he's able to throw, and like I say, it's very sudden and explosive and hard to be able to counteract in time when he throws these combinations. He carries power well, he's disciplined but aggressive, he's got good body work, he makes you overreach with really good kind of small footworking adjustments where he is shuffling back a little bit and then he makes you overreach and then he comes in with the counter. And if he can do that to Inoue, he might be able to counter his jab, or if he is, overreaching a little bit at times. He's got a high guard, which is good to be able to stop shots, of course, to the head, but I'll carry on speaking about that a little bit more in a moment as to why that might be a negative. He's got very good sharp counters, maybe they're not always causing a tremendous amount of damage, but they are often off-putting shots, and if he can land them, again, like I say, on Inoue, then it could definitely cause him a few issues. His pivots and movements are really good. He's hard to pin down. He angles out when he's finished his combinations, which is another thing in which plenty of fighters don't do. They can often go back in square, in straight lines, and Akhmadaliev isn't doing that. So he's really hard, like I say, to be able to, pin down. He catches you waiting. He works his angles really well. Like I say, with them pivots, he sets traps, which, can be a bit dangerous to do against somebody like Inoue. But again, he sets them traps. He's accurate and he's composed. Negatives about him, I think he is the more flat-footed of the two. Maybe he's, I don't know who's got the better defensive footwork really, because Inoue does, take nice defensive backward steps as well, but he is a bit more flat-footed at times. Akhmadaliev, when he's not pivoting and, putting a bit of awkward movements in, he can just be walking forwards a little bit at points. He's got less head movement. I think his head is, on the line much more. I think, struggles to find his reach a little bit more early on, and again, that's where Inoue might be able to assert himself a bit early. It will be interesting to see if Inoue is going to want to come out quickly early on due to the fact of, what's been happening in his recent fights early. We will have to wait and see. And something with that high guard is the fact that his body can be left open as a target, and it has been hurt, and he has been, a little bit hurt to the body, which has, I think, been evident and been shown. And then he drops his, guard, and against Tapales he was hurt a bit to the body, and then he drops his guard, and then he gets caught, to his head. So again, it's a high guard, but it's not really a tight guard. And again, like I say, it means that he is very open to the body. And when you're somebody like Inoue, who is such a good body puncher, I think he is going to be able to land some, deadly shots there. He's more willing to be backed up and to take that backward step and to invite that pressure a bit more. He can take to give at times, Akhmadaliev, and he can be caught by a jab. He can overreach his own shots at points and fights typically at a bit of a slower pace, a bit more often than that of Inoue. And like I say, I think he can admire his work, and he think he does have a bit of lack of feints. Again, comparing that to Inoue as well. But again, all these negatives and all these positives, at the end of the day, they're two elite fighters who are going up against each other, so it is going to be a chess match, I believe, for this fight. Who do I think is going to win? I think that Naoya Inoue is going to be able to win via TKO in round 8. Maybe that's a surprising thing to say. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are probably going to be leaning towards Inoue, but then maybe an Inoue decision. But I think if Inoue can, get that bodywork going, he can slow down Akhmadaliev's counters. And then if he can slow down his counters and, get through them early rounds, then he can figure out his own timing, his own speed, and, set his own traps. And again, Akhmadaliev, I don't think has faced somebody quite as, skilled as Inoue. And I think Inoue is growing with each fight, learning even more about, fighting a southpaw. And he has fought quite a few southpaws now. So again, I think Inoue with the power, again, is another thing in which Akhmadaliev, I don't believe, has had to face at that kind of high of a level. And again, like I say, just body shots, I think it is going to accumulate. I mean, he is going to get stopped via TKO in round 8. But I think he is still going to put out a very valiant effort, Akhmadaliev, in this fight. And then, I mean, who next? It probably is going to be Picasso, no doubt. Moving on now to speak about the co-main event. Give a little prediction for the co-main, and then another world title fight which is on this card, which I'll speak about in a moment. The co-main is Yoshiki Takei versus Christian Medina Jimenez for the WBO World Bantamweight title. And I mean, Takei in his last fight made easy work of Tongdi, which to be fair he realistically had to do because he was coming off the fight against Daigo Higa, which was a very tough fight in which, in my opinion, I feel like he kind of was very fortunate to get a win in that one, and I felt like definitely could have been a draw, but he battled well in the latter parts of that fight, just enough to be able to get the win. But still, he needed to make easy work of Tongdi to really assert himself as a true champion. And he did that. And again, like I say, that was nice to see. I mean, he's up against a Mexican here who isn't like these Thai fighters who come in with really padded records but really aren't that good. I think he is, going to be a tough test here, Jimenez. But of course, at the same time, with Nakatani moving up, Takei has a real, good chances to be a big name in the division. I think there's going to be plenty of matchups there to be made with contenders who are going to be hungry to fight for the vacant titles. And I think Takei could go and get an opportunity to become a unified champion within the next fight or so, like I say, with Nakatani moving up. For this fight, though, I want to see Takei, throwing less loaded up shots. Yes, he can land really nice, accurate, loaded up shots with sharp singles, but when he was landing more in volume against Higa, that was really what was having him a lot of success in the later rounds of that fight. And, I think he showcased a very good chin in that fight, which is again something in which, of course, every fight has to deal with. But again, I don't want to have to see him get hurt, get rocked, and then be able to really have to force in and dig deep to be able to let his hands go a bit more. I think if he throws them combinations, which are really nice combinations that he does throw, then he can have a lot more success in this fight for a longer period. And I mean, when you're fighting against Jimenez, he's a good name. He's a good Mexican fighter. He's a durable guy. Single shots, I don't think are going to wilt him enough. And again, like I said, I would like to see that more of a volume there. Jimenez is somebody who has fought and lost against the champion in Nishida, but that was Nishida before he was a champion, so a few years ago now, and that was a unanimous decision as well. But you can guarantee a tough, durable Mexican challenger here with Jimenez. He's not a come forward, just let everything go and just be an absolute war rugged guy. He is, got a little bit more to his game, but he is going to be a lot tougher than certain fighters in the division, and he is going to be, like I say, not just going to, he's not just going to bow down and take a shot and then, like I say, just wilt. Jimenez, I don't think he's a bad fighter at all. I mean, I think he's got good head movement in close, which is something in which I saw in one of his fights. I think it was against Alexis Molina, which was one of his best wins. And again, that was really impressive to see. And again, perhaps he can, cause a bit of front foot problems to Takei. And, he's good in close. He comes forwards with power and has decent front foot counters at the same time. So, again, he might be able to have a bit of success with that. He doesn't have the speed and sharpness, and I think makes himself a bit too big of a target at times when he is throwing punches. And again, if he is against somebody who offensively can't cause him any problems, then he might be able to just walk through any kind of damage in which he takes. But against somebody like Takei, again, I think with, the combinations in which he can throw on the back foot, again, maybe if he is going to the body with singular shots, it, I think, will deter Jimenez. And I think Takei, with the body shots, if he can pair him up, if he can mix up his work, then he can really outbox him here and move around him and, like I say, have a lot of success. But if he gets into a war, if it gets physical, Jimenez is going to have much more success. I think that Takei is going to be able to win via unanimous decision. I'm not going to root against him in this fight. I think he is going to be able to, like I say, have his own work and have a bit of success, like I say. But, like I say, I would like to see more volume, not just leaving it to the final round to be able to clutch up. Like I say, I would like to see a bit more to his game because I think he has it in him. It's just I want to see it, and maybe even a bit more of a jab as well to actually set that bit more of a range, and that would, I think, really deter Jimenez. And again, like I say, maybe a bit more movement as well. Then we can go on to fight next. Probably a Nasukawa fight would be a huge fight for a vacant title in Japan. I think that's what they're setting up for Nasukawa. He's been on the big stages for a long time now, so again, that could be a huge fight to make, like I say, perhaps for the WBO belt and then maybe a vacant belt when Nakatani moves up. Or Higa again, perhaps that could be an option. I mean, Higa just had another very tough fight with Antonio Vargas, so will Higa just keep getting rinsed and repeated against these champions? We'll have to wait and see, but I feel like surely he deserves his opportunity to rematch at least one of the champions, Daigo Higa. Or Reyes, another tough Mexican. I think that perhaps could happen just as another option as a highly ranked contender. I don't think they're going to give Yoshiki Takei a unification fight just yet. Moving on to the final fight which I'm going to be speaking about on this card, it is for the WBA regular world minimum weight title, and that is Yuni Takada versus Ryusei Matsumoto. And again, this is definitely a fight which is again going under the radar. I mean, it's for a regular belt, which is probably not necessary to have on the line. But again, when you look at the state of the minimum weight division at the moment, I mean, of course, we've recently had the sad kind of bowing out of the Shigioka brothers. I mean, hope everything is going okay with Jinjiro Shigioka. I'm not really hearing the best of things, but that was, about a month ago that I heard a few things. So again, I don't really know what's going on with that, but I know that Yudai Shigioka retired. So again, that was a sad ending to a really, bright pair of brothers who really were creating a lot of hype in Japan in the minimum weight division. But again, it means the division is in need of a new, fresh set of challengers, and Matsumoto has a chance here to showcase that he is that realistically. I mean, this fight being for the belt, saying that Collazo is full WBA champion isn't really that relevant. Like I say, the belt isn't really that relevant, but it's probably a way to stir up a bit more attention on the division because realistically, like I say, this shouldn't be for a world title when Collazo is the full champion. But again, there does need to be a Japanese kind of champion realistically in the minimum weight division because of how dominant they are in the other divisions. There does need to be at least a Japanese champion in the minimum weight division realistically, because like I say, there needs to be that hype there with the Japanese fans that are going to come and are going to watch in the lower weight divisions. And that's where Ryusei Matsumoto might be able to come in and have a bit of success. But of course, Yuni Takada isn't going to be an easy person to just walk through. I mean, Takada's had a long, tough career where since the beginning he's been welcoming upcoming challengers with good records around Japanese kind of regional level, but he's only, still 27 years of age, and he's been able to rally back his career in the more recent years since, the 2020s times where he was having a bit of a rocky period and just before that. But now, like I say, he's rallied back his career. He's on an 8-fight winning streak, all on regional level, but now he's getting his opportunity to fight for that of a world title, which for him, I'm sure feels like a true world title, a true moment to really showcase such a, something that he's worked so hard for. And I mean, if you've looked at some of Yuni Takada's fights, I mean, maybe he is a little bit of a one-dimensional fighter at times, but he's got good, solid fundamentals. He's got a nice jab and he's got a solid uppercut, which he pairs up well. But in close, maybe he does have a bit of problems at times and does walk onto shots, but he does know how to kind of go all the rounds with that experience, and he does have a good chin, in my opinion. Yes, he's been stopped in fights in the past, but I still believe he has got a good chin and a tremendous amount of heart. I mean, there's a couple of his regional fights which are just truly wars, which I would recommend you guys go and watch if you have not done so already. He is just slugging it out with guys in the final, few seconds of certain fights. And again, that is something in which, of course, Matsumoto hasn't had to deal with just yet. Matsumoto, of course, as southpaw, has kind of just had his career where he's been able to beat up Japanese regional scene fighters, and as a result has basically been moved up quite quickly. He's 6-0, 4 KOs, and it's often the case with Japanese fighters where, of course, if they are they're matched very tough early on, so again they're able to progress quite quickly if they are able to go through a lot of fighters, well, a few fighters, and look impressive, like I say, getting stoppages early on. I don't believe Matsumoto will be dragged into a war for this fight. He seems like quite a patient fighter who's willing to wait for his moments, being quite defensively sound with quite a nice tight guard, and like I say, really will wait for his moments with strong, powerful, explosive work. I don't think Takada is going to just bow over and just let him work through. But I think Takada, with that war mentality in which is there, Takada in the first few rounds, if he is fighting after mid-range, he could have plenty of success with just that fast kind of jab in which he pumps out. But again, if he gets into that war mindset and he wants to go toe-to-toe, if he gets hurt of a shot and then just tries to go toe-to-toe, I think Matsumoto will be able to catch quite a few of his shots on his guard, because he won't be just trying to slug it out himself. And then I think, the power advantage for Matsumoto over Takada will come to fruition, and I think inevitably he will be able to win via TKO in round 8. That's my prediction. Again, I think the more defensively sound Matsumoto can showcase the flaws in Takada's game for this fight. Then who he can go on to fight? I mean, realistically, Collazo versus Vason, the winner of that probably would be who Matsumoto would be wanting, and that could perhaps be quite a big fight there for Collazo, maybe. Maybe they might want to also build Matsumoto up a little bit more before they go in and try and challenge against, the best guy in the division, and, in my opinion, a pound-for-pound great fighter in Collazo. So maybe someone like a Kanoi or a Saludar, again, two top contenders, I believe both Filipino fighters who have kind of been around for quite a while and been able to gather a bit more of world level experience, unlike somebody like Takada, who, like I say, is a bit more regional level experience, high regional level experience in Japan. So again, that could be a good test as well for Matsumoto, but I feel like the future is bright for him, and he is going to be able to lead Japan in the minimum weight division for at least the next year or so, in my opinion, before maybe he then gets jumped up in some real tough top tests. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did indeed like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.